DeVonta Smith is one of the biggest X factors of Super Bowl 59. Who else has an underrated role for the Eagles on Sunday? We'll get into it on this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. I'm your host, Louie DiBiase, joining you down at Radio Row in New Orleans, less than a week away from Eagles-Chiefs Super Bowl 59. And we know how crucial Jalen Hurts is going to be in this game. Saquon Barkley, A.J. Brown, Jalen Carter, all the alphas on both sides. Like, there's some obvious matchups that we've gotten into. Vic Fangio against Andy Reid, stopping Travis Kelce, especially in those money situations, the improv plays on third and fourth down in the red zone. But there's some X factors that are underratedly important for the Eagles on Sunday, and one of them I had the opportunity to talk to at Media Night yesterday at the Superdome, and it's DeVonta Smith. DeVonta Smith, funny enough, actually has averaged more yards per game against the Kansas City Chiefs than any player in Kansas City's franchise history. DeVonta has averaged 107 yards even per game against a Steve Spagnuolo defense. As a rookie in 2021, had an incredible game in September. Of course, the Super Bowl has 100 yards receiving in that matchup. That big play in the fourth quarter helped set up Jalen Hurts for the game-tying touchdown with 5 minutes to go. Last year in Arrowhead, makes the game-winning reception to allow the Eagles to score the go-ahead touchdown with, again, a little under 6 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. DeVonta is so important in this game, and it's not a coincidence that he's important and he's had success against a defense run by Spags, because Spags is going to throw a lot of different pressure looks at you. You saw with the Buffalo Bills AFC title game. He throws a corner blitz at Josh Allen on a fourth down with the game on the line. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that Spags dials up. So how do you counter that? It's the quick passing game. Like, the quick passing game for the Eagles is going to be really important, like it was last week against the Commanders. DeVonta in the slot, those choice routes, that can help you counter what Spags does with the Chiefs defense. Again, I don't think it's a coincidence he's had success against Kansas City. He's someone that can get open really quick, especially if Kellen Moore puts him on the inside. He's not facing Trent McDuffie, who might be on A.J. Brown more in this game than DeVonta. Jalen looks for DeVonta in those situations when the play breaks down, when there is pressure. Clutch moments, the fourth quarter, third and fourth down, like gotta have it moments. DeVonta is that guy. It's not a coincidence that he's had success against the Chiefs or that he's made big plays in the second half of playoff games. It's not a coincidence either that he leads the Eagles franchise all-time in playoff receiving yards. So I think DeVonta Smith is a really important part of the game plan in Super Bowl 59. I would not be surprised at all if he leads this team in receiving. And what's crazy is he can actually become, if he wins a ring on Sunday, he can become one of 4 players to ever win a national championship, a Heisman Trophy, and a Super Bowl. Like, talk about a hat trick, if you will, in hockey terms. I mean, that is something that only a couple players you can count on one hand have ever done. So DeVonta Smith actually has a chance to make history on Sunday, and I don't think he's going to do it by being just a small role player in this game. I think he's going to have a really important role against a Chiefs defense that, again, they're going to want to throw a lot of different pressure looks at Jalen Hurts. Throughout Hurts' career, that's something he's struggled with, but lately has been a lot better at. Because he's been getting the ball out quickly, he's been in a rhythm. In those kind of situations, when the ball's out quick, he does well against this kind of defense. Super Bowl 57, Hurts handled Spags' pressure looks really well. But then there's other times, a lot of times this year where, last year against Tampa Bay too, where a defense throws a lot of pressure looks at Jalen, and if he's holding onto the ball too long, dropping his eyes and trying to run around, that's when he can get into trouble. So DeVonta can really be crucial in helping Jalen stay on track against this Chiefs defense. But there's some other factors as well that go into this Eagles win that are kind of underrated. I think an X factor on defense, they're the edge rushers. Nolan Smith, Josh Sweat, Jalix Hunt, Brandon Graham, if he does have a sizable role in this game. Because Jalen Carter has yet another mismatch on the inside. Milton Williams is going to get a lot of one-on-one looks. So is Moro Ijoma, because Jalen Carter is going to demand those double teams. So you know there's going to be pressure coming from the Eagles' interior. That's the strength of this defensive line. They have 3 of the best pass-rushing defensive tackles in football. And, oh, by the way, Jordan Davis also got a sack in the NFC Championship against Washington. So if Jordan Davis is getting pressure too, you got 4 guys now on the interior that can get to Patrick Mahomes. So you know they're going to get to Patrick. But I think that's why the edge rushers are underrated, because they're the ones that got to finish. Patrick Mahomes is very good at escaping pressure. When the play breaks down, is there a better improv quarterback in NFL history than Patrick Mahomes? I mean, probably not. So there's going to be times that Jalen Carter, he gets there, he hits home, Milton Williams, Moro Ijoma, but you got to finish these plays. I think that's something in Super Bowl 57 they were not able to do. This year at times when they've played Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels, there's been moments the Eagles get pressure, but those mobile quarterbacks, they make you pay. So the edge rushers, they got to contain. They got to try to keep Mahomes inside the pocket. And when Mahomes does leak to the outside, when the edge rushers do get home as well, Sweat, Smith, Hunt, Graham, they can't over-pursue. Pass rush lanes are very important. The angles that they take, they have to make sure they get Mahomes on the ground. When there's pressure on the inside, they got to finish. And when they get pressure on the outside, they got to make sure they don't take the wrong angle and allow Mahomes to escape, because that's when him and Travis Kelce, that's when they make magic. So I really think, and of course Nolan Smith is one of their best players on defense. It's the other guys, Josh Sweat, Jalix Hunt, Brandon Graham. Those guys are really crucial as well in a win on Sunday. The 2022 pass rush, when you think about it, like, that was a historic unit, but I actually think this year in the Super Bowl, you're going to get a massive pass rush boost compared to Super Bowl 57, because although the personnel was better in that game, that field, the golf grass that they experimented on in the Arizona stadium, which was unbelievable. They did that in a Super Bowl, but that field completely neutralized the Eagles' historic pass rush. They could not get to Patrick Mahomes the entire game, and when they did, they were slipping and could not finish plays. So this line, I think, is, by the way, extremely underrated because of how young they are. Are they the same as the 2022 defensive line personnel-wise? No, that line was superior. But in this game, I actually think it's going to be an upgraded pass rush because, again, the field, the conditions of that matchup 2 years ago, it's not going to be the same this time around. And I think Jalen Carter, of anybody, combining 2022 and 2024 on a defensive line for the Eagles, he's the best player of those 2 units combined. And I think he's gonna dominate in this game. I really think he has yet another big-time mismatch with the Chiefs' interior. They're going to try to double him, and if they do, I think he'll still hit home. And if so, Milton Williams and Moro Ijoma have shown they're both top 10 players on the interior at winning one-on-one matchups and getting to the quarterback. So the defensive line, the edge rushers, big-time X factor. It is crazy, though. I saw this tweet from Mina Kimes yesterday. The Eagles are actually the only defense in the league this year that created a negative EPA per play when they did not get pressure. So when the Eagles were not hitting home, they still created per play a negative EPA for the opposing offense. And that's huge because the Chiefs are a team that are they rely on yards after the catch so much, right? Nobody has thrown for more passing yards that started behind the line of scrimmage since 2018 than Patrick Mahomes. Like, that's what an Andy Reid offense does. They like to throw screen passes, getting the ball out of Mahomes' hands quickly. I think that's why, too, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, the secondary, Chauncey specifically, is a big-time X factor. Tackling is so important in this game against that kind of offense. CGJ might be covering Travis Kelce as well, so I think Chauncey's a big-time X factor in that way, too. You got to be physical. Tackling is so important in this matchup. So I would say you look at DeVonta Smith, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, Josh Sweat, and Jalix Hunt. Those are some X factors in Super Bowl 59. Coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast, Media Night is over in New Orleans. There was an underlying theme, though, from all of the comments Eagles players made. I'll get into that coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles. This episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is sponsored by Prize Picks. The big game is almost here, and there's no better way to make it even more exciting than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings awarded, Prize Picks makes it fun and simple to get in on the action. So here's how it works. All you got to do, pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and And if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. PrizePicks even has a free pick for the big game where Patrick Mahomes, he only needs to throw 1 yard to win. Pair that with one more correct pick, and you're cashing out. This week, I'm looking at the board and selecting more for DeVonta Smith's receiving yards, and I'm going to take more for Jalen Hurts' passing yardage. Download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL. You're going to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. Run your game. All right, so media night concluded yesterday at the Superdome. I had the opportunity to talk to DeVonta Smith, Lane Johnson, Howie Roseman. There was an underlying theme from the comments of all of those guys, and it had a lot to do with Nick Sirianni. And they didn't say his name specifically, but what they talked about was something that's not quantifiable, and I think people roll their eyes at this and they don't give it enough credit for why the Eagles and other NFL teams have success. But I asked Lane Johnson what the difference is between this team, what's unique about this team versus 2022. And he kind of talked about how it's very similar to 2017, the closeness, like the bond that this locker room has. That was really founded based on their adversity experience. Their ability to overcome adversity together has really brought this team closer. And DeVonta Smith said a lot of the same things. Howie Roseman says he hasn't seen a locker room this close in a long time. Like, these guys play for each other, and Howie deserves a lot of credit for that. Like, just for example, all the Georgia players he drafted, there's just a built-in chemistry already with those guys on defense, and it's allowed for the defense to be a lot closer, especially in one unit. So they all kind of talked about that, and I think Nick Sirianni deserves the most credit for building that culture. And again, because he's not a play caller, because he has, I think, a historically great general manager and one of the best rosters that this team has ever seen in franchise history, maybe the best one, I still think Nick Sirianni, because he's not a play caller and because of the support system around him, even if he wins a ring, he's still not going to get enough credit for his impact on this team's potential championship season. Like, I really think, we talked about legacy yesterday, Jalen Hurts can do so much for his legacy by getting this ring, and same with Howie Roseman, and you look on the other side, Pat Mahomes, Andy Reid, Travis Kelce. For Sirianni, it should absolutely help his legacy. If he gets a ring, there's only a few coaches that have ever done what he has done in their first 4 seasons, and one of those names is the guy the trophy's named after, Vince Lombardi. So I think he deserves that credit, and his legacy, for people, for the real ones, they'll know what kind of coach he is. But I still don't think he'll get enough credit, because what he does best, the impact he has on this team, it's not quantifiable with film study, with statistics. But when you hear Lane Johnson talk, DeVonta Smith, Howie Roseman, everything they say that's special about this football team, Nick Sirianni has his fingerprints all over. I think he deserves so much credit. And yeah, I've totally done a complete 180 on Nick. I think I put too much emphasis on play calling and certain things that, again, you can quantify, because that's the only way to really judge a coach if you're not behind the scenes. And that's why I'm kind of more hesitant to judge coaches now. Because even yesterday, Jeff Stoutland said, he actually was asked about Mekhi Becton and moving to guard, and Stoutland gave the credit to that move to Nick Sirianni. He said Nick Sirianni's actually the one in the summer that said, let's try Becton at right guard. And that's further proof how hard it is to responsibly judge a coach, because how are we supposed to know that it was actually Nick and not Stoutland that was behind that? We've been giving Stoutland credit for that all year. How would we have known? Nick Sirianni doesn't take credit for that kind of stuff, and a lot of times he takes all the blame for his players and for poor decisions. So I'm completely turning the corner on Nick, and I also am trying to be more responsible in judging a coach that's not a play caller, because it's really hard to put responsibility, to put blame or credit on a coach when you're not behind the scenes. And so I think you have to look deeper into their impact. You got to ask questions to players, to the assistant coaching staff as well, and the general manager. And you gotta see, like, even like the video of Chauncey Gardner-Johnson crying, hugging Nick after the title win. Like, you really got to be more responsible, look deeper into a coach's impact outside of play calling. And I think people are just too lazy at times to do that. And I think it's allowed for a guy like Nick Sirianni to be unfairly criticized and to be, I think, criminally underrated at this point. So it's incredible where I'm at with him compared to, after 4 weeks of this season, heading into the bye week where I wanted him completely fired. But especially yesterday, my eyes were open talking to Lane and DeVonta and Howie. And, I think they all see the value in him. And again, it's not quantifiable based on film, based on stats, and that's how a lot of people that aren't behind closed doors, that's the only way you can judge. And I think that's allowed for Nick Sirianni's legacy to be hurt a little bit. And unfortunately, there's not going to be a ton of people like me that will understand that. And there will be a lot of people that still say, hey, he's a product of his system. He's a, if you will, a system head coach where he's carried by his two coordinators that run the offense and run the defense. He's carried by Howie Roseman. He's carried by the roster. Sure, does all of that help and he has an elite historic support system? Absolutely. But you're nuts now if you don't see Nick Sirianni's impact. If you don't see how they turned things around from the collapse last year, how they turned things around the 2-2 start, hearing the players give him credit, hearing Stoutland give him credit for the Becton move, hearing Lane Johnson talk about how crucial that meeting was after the Tampa loss during the bye week to turn the offense into a run-heavy team. Sirianni deserves credit for all that kind of stuff. And I still don't think he's getting it. And I felt like that was a consistent theme of media night. So I hope Nick's legacy is impacted in a positive way by the Super Bowl win. I think it absolutely will. But when you compare his legacy impact in this game compared to a Jalen Hurts, compared to a Howie Roseman, unfortunately, I still don't think it's going to do a whole lot to make him seen in the light that he deserves, for him to get the credit and the status that he fully deserves. But the players see it. The general manager sees it, Jeffrey Lurie, the owner, sees it, the organization sees it, and the real ones that are smart enough to do the research and to really do the responsible thinking, they see it. And I think that's all they care about, at least. But it is annoying the public perception probably still won't be justified when it comes to talking about Nick Sirianni. All right, guys, I know it's Super Bowl week, but there's been a lot going on here at Radio Row, a lot of news about the offseason that impacts the Eagles. And I want to get into that coming up next. It has to do with Kellen Moore potentially leaving for New Orleans, Myles Garrett and Cooper Kupp in the offseason on the trade block. We'll get into that and more coming up on this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. This episode of Locked On Eagles is brought to you by Game Time. Looking for tickets to your next big event, maybe last-minute tickets to the big game in New Orleans, whether it's a concert, comedy show, sporting event, finding the right tickets at the right price can be a headache. But with Game Time Picks, it's been easier than ever. Let me tell you how it works. With Game Time Picks, the app does all the hard work for you. It curates the best deals, so you don't have to waste time searching through endless ticket listings. I've been using Game Time Picks for a while now, and the curated deals make it super simple to find great tickets at a great price. Plus, on top of things like the Super Deal, where you're getting a prime seat, you can also check out the Seat View feature, where I can hit buy and I can see exactly where my seat is going to be, what it's going to look like in the venue, and that's definitely reassuring for me. Ready to make your next event better? Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, so it sounds like the Eagles and Jalen Hurts will yet again need another play caller, a new one, in 2025. Barring any setbacks, Kellen Moore likely to take the New Orleans Saints head coaching job. That was reported by Adam Schefter yesterday. Although then there was that case from the Saints that could be something that deters him. I doubt it. I still think Kellen Moore is going to cash in on that contract. And, you know, you never know if you're a head coach candidate in just a year. Look at Bobby Slowick from the Houston Texans. Last year was seen as a prime top-tier head coaching candidate, and then this year he got fired as the Texans offensive coordinator and play caller. So I do still think Kellen Moore is going to take that job, and that means Jalen Hurts is going to be on his fifth play caller in Philadelphia since 2020. Doug Peterson, Nick Sirianni, Shane Steichen, Brian Johnson, Kellen Moore. Actually, it's going to be number 6. It's going to be his sixth play caller. Plus, he had a bunch of them in college at Alabama and Oklahoma. So that's the one thing I did talk about Sirianni's value in our second segment, but that is also why, though, I still, to this day, prefer a play-calling head coach, because there is that sustainability factor between the head coach, the play caller, and the quarterback, and that's one of the most important relationships in sports. Why do you think the Chiefs have 3 Super Bowl rings and they're trying for a 4th and a three-peat? It's because of that Pat Mahomes-Andy Reid dynamic. Outside of Travis Kelce, outside of that, the offense, it's been a lot of moving parts over this 5 Super Bowl run that Kansas City's had since 2018. So I wish the Eagles still had that as a head coach. I wish Nick Sirianni was able to figure out the play calling part of it. But Jalen Hurts has proven that he can figure this out, that every year he has a new play caller, he can still stay effective. And when it comes to who the Eagles should bring in if Kellen Moore does accept the Saints job, I heard that Kevin Patullo, their pass game coordinator, could be a top candidate. I'm not a fan of that. I think the Eagles, every time they've had an internal promotion where they hire from the inside, Doug Peterson with Press Taylor, Nick Sirianni with Brian Johnson, it normally has not worked out. So for me, I would like the outside hire. The other thing with Patullo is as well, sure, I do like the continuation aspect of it. It would be a guy inside that helped seamlessly transition the Nick Sirianni offense into the Kellen Moore offense, mesh the different concepts and philosophies together to create this year's offense. That's nice. That part of it is a positive. And again, you could have that continuation with a guy inside the building. But for Patullo, he's never called plays before. I think the Eagles were trying to move away from a Sirianni-style offense, and Patullo has been with Sirianni since 2021, so I don't know if they prefer to kind of go backwards in that way. Although, again, he helped transition into the Kellen Moore offense and the two styles kind of being married together this year. And again, just the internal promotion just has never really helped. So I don't know if I love that idea. I like going and finding a guy from the outside. The problem is that these guys, again, they're going to continue to have success in Philadelphia with the talent they have, and teams are just going to keep poaching them as head coaches, and that's the one issue. I wish there was a guy you could find, and all the candidates I see are still young and hot coaching candidates, so I wish you could find a Vic Fangio type that's not going to go anywhere. Like, Vic Fangio is going to be the Eagles' defensive coordinator for as long as he wants, and I don't think he's going to want to be a head coach again. I don't think a team would want Vic Fangio as their head coach again. I wish you could find that style of guy, but all the candidates I see are like the Josh McCowns of the world, and I think those types of candidates, teams are going to want as their head coach, a young offensive mind that's played the most important position in sports and could potentially call plays for an elite offense. That's just kind of the life of being a really good football team with a good quarterback and a good offense, and you have a head coach that doesn't call plays. It's the unfortunate reality of it, but at the same time, like I said, Nick Sirianni has shown that it's not a reason you get rid of him, that he's not calling plays, because you still get to the Super Bowl with Shane Steichen, with Kellen Moore, and I do think they could do it again. But yeah, I'm not in on the internal promotion. Like, it doesn't work. It hasn't worked, at least in the past, with Press Taylor, with Brian Johnson. That wasn't all on those guys, but yeah, I'm not in on that one. I would definitely want to go through the outside and try to hire a guy from another team. Some other offseason news that we've heard down here. Myles Garrett, of course, requested a trade yesterday from the Cleveland Browns. Cooper Kupp announced the Los Angeles Rams are putting him on the trade block. I know it's too early to talk Eagles offseason. They have the game of their life on Sunday. But I will say I'm kind of in on both ideas. I really like the idea of trading for Myles Garrett. Like, if Howie Roseman's if he's thinking to himself, okay, what's my big splash move this year? Last year it's Saquon Barkley. A couple years ago it's bringing in A.J. Brown. How do I stay ahead of the curve? Like, how do I keep this team in contention? I like the idea with all these rookie contracts on defense. Maybe giving Myles Garrett a short-term front-loaded deal, bring him in to replace Josh Sweat, who, by the way, just switched agents yesterday, hired Drew Rosenhaus. I think he's going to command a pretty big contract on the open market, only 27 years old, led the Eagles in sacks this year with 8. I don't think Sweat's going to be back. You're going to need another edge rusher. Brandon Graham probably going to retire after the Super Bowl. You've got Nolan Smith and Jalen Hunt, but maybe you say, let's just go for it. Let's pair Jalen Carter with Myles Garrett, maybe the best edge rusher of the decade. If not number one, he's top 3 with the likes of, TJ Watt as well in there. I'm kind of in on that. You have the draft picks. Maybe you give up a pick and a couple picks and you get one of the best edge rushers in football next year. I really like that idea. I've already talked to a couple people down here that were saying, don't let Howie get his hands on number 95. He has a relationship with Andrew Berry in Cleveland. I don't know. Maybe that's something to consider. But for now, the Eagles still have one game to play this year, the biggest game, Super Bowl 59. And the edge rushers are really important. And Myles Garrett would be important next year maybe to acquire. But Josh Sweat, Jalen Hunt, Nolan Smith, Brandon Graham, big-time X factors in this game against Kansas City. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this Tuesday edition of Locked On Eagles. Thanks so much for making us your first listen each and every day. 3 more shows for you still, though, before Super Bowl 59. Got crossover Thursday with the guys over at Locked On Chiefs, and then 2 other podcasts, so make sure you subscribe on YouTube and all podcast platforms. Louie DiBiase signing off. Thanks always for downloading, watching, listening, and let's go Birds. Fly, Eagles, fly.